The 11x59mm Gras, or the 11mm Vickers as it's also known as, was France's first ever fully metallic cartridge. There are a few interesting things about this round, from it being one of the last truly black powder cartridges of its time, to it being used to take down observation balloons during World War I, but more on that later. Today we discuss a round that honestly I could hardly find any information on at first, at least at this part of my script when I was writing it. So the runtime today might be a little bit shorter than it has been in recent times, but I don't know yet because I just started recording and I don't know how long this is going to take, or I don't know how long this is going to be. So just bear with me. But that's not stopping us from doing a video, now is it? In fact, if it weren't for the fact that this was France's first ever metallic cartridge, I was actually just going to skip this one, if I'm being completely honest. But prepare for plenty of French slander because it's one of the last groups of people that we can still rag on without the threat of ruining one's career. Howdy do, folks, and welcome back to Chambered in History, where we're going over the story of cartridges that made history themselves. From back-of-the-drawer relics to big-bore bruisers, we're cracking open the brass cases and spilling out the history. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to stay up to date on all of our cartridge adventures and everything in between. And yes, I know I skipped last week. This was supposed to go up last week, but I hated my script and I couldn't piece it together. It was the same thing. It was kind of a writer's block, so I would rather skip than put out a crap video for y'all. So here we are, 2 weeks later. It'll be all right. After their unsurprising defeat during the Franco-Prussian War, France realized that their paper-cased ammunition just wasn't going to cut it anymore. Now, while the Germans were armed with their Gras needle guns, the French were armed with their far superior chassepot rifles with their, again, paper-cased ammunition. Did it work? Yeah, sure. Were they as experienced with their rifles as the Germans were with their Gras needle guns, even though the rifle itself was more superior? No, not at all. Did the paper-cased ammunition hold up well in the heat of battle and the harsh conditions of battle? Hell no, not even a little bit. That last one was really the main problem that we've seen many times. Between their crappy tactics and their evident loss, the French realized that they, at the very least, needed to upgrade their small arms, especially after the Germans had just come out with the Mauser 71, which really lit a fire under France's butt to get something cranked out eventually. Sure, the needle-fired weapons were superior to the old muzzleloaders that they were using before, but that meant nothing in a world of emerging metal-cased ammunition, so might as well try to keep up with the times. These revelations all came together, leading to a competition for someone to come up with a rifle and cartridge combo to fire modern cartridge ammunition, at least modern to them. And then in 1874, the 11x59mm Gras, as well as the very appropriately named 1874 Gras, rifle were crowned the winners. They began producing the 74 Gras immediately, as well as later converting the old chassepot rifles to shoot the new 11x59mm. And although the 11mm brass-cased ammunition wasn't necessarily that much more powerful or anything, it still solved the problems they were having with the paper-cased ammunition. I mean, when it could get wet now, it wasn't detrimental to them, so it solved a lot of problems, so it was still better. The round, rifle, and conversion were all designed by French artillery colonel Basile Gras. I think it's Basile. I don't know. That's another one I should have looked up. I looked up the rest of these, but that one I forgot to do. Simultaneously achieving his military's need for a new modern rifle, as well as saving them a lot of money by converting some of the existing platforms. To be exact, about 150,000 were eventually converted, which is definitely a win because now the country has 150,000 less rifles that they have to produce. They just convert the old ones. We've seen that many times before here on the channel, especially with these old rifles. They pretty much always convert the existing ones, which is, again, very smart. Save a lot of money, a lot of time, but it's a smart way to go about it. See, Gras was a smart man. He was an alumnus at École Polytechnique, a school specializing in science and engineering, as well as a shooting instructor at, bear with me now, École Normale de Tir à Chalons. I'll put it here. I don't know. I should have translated that, you idiot. Anyway, he'd also go on to eventually supervise a handful of weapons manufacturing facilities, as well as eventually becoming Secretary of War for his country. So it's no surprise that we find this rifle and cartridge combo on Gras's long list of achievements in his life. In fact, Gras's designs were instrumental in the design and development of the Lebel rifle as well as its 8mm cartridge. And while I couldn't find an exact number on how much 11x59mm ammo was produced. I did find that about 4 million rifles were produced in its 10-year production. So I'd say it's pretty safe to say there's more than that produced as rounds wise. I can't imagine them producing more rifles than they did rounds. So it's pretty safe to say there's a lot of rounds out there, or was before they shot them all. Now the 1874 Gras did have a handful of changes from its Chassepot older brother, including or improved sights for a better sight picture, as well as a two-piece cock-on open bolt as opposed to the manually cocked bolt of the Chassepot rifle. And then later in 1880, the Gras rifles received channels and grooves cut into the receiver. This was to allow gases to escape during the event of a case rupture, which happened pretty often back then because they were still getting the hang of brass cases back then, so it happened pretty often. Rifles that received these upgrades, or this upgrade, were stamped M.80 and were often referred to as Gras 7480 rifles. Now, this cartridge and rifle saw a good handful of conflicts, but the one that I find most interesting, although it was years after it had already been officially replaced, was its role that it played in World War I, as they did some pretty weird stuff with it. What kind of weird stuff, you may ask? Well, that's what I'm here for. For starters, these rounds were used, as I mentioned in the intro, to take down observation balloons using incendiary rounds. They were shot out of Hotchkiss M1914 machine guns, and the rounds themselves used phosphorus as the igniting material. So when you would shoot, the phosphorus would ignite, and it would actually leave behind a blue trail of smoke, so they also call them smoke tracers. But whenever it would hit the balloon, there was hydrogen inside the balloon, as many of you may know, and it was on fire, so it would light them and take them down very easily. So it was a lot more effective at doing that than the regular rounds were. Now, the incendiary rounds weren't all that much more effective on people as the regular rounds were, but they were extremely effective for those balloons, so that's what they used them for. They basically just used the Hotchkiss as an anti-balloon weapon. That was its whole role, and it used the 11x59mm with incendiary rounds. Though the M1914 was eventually replaced by the Vickers machine gun, hence why the round is sometimes called the 11mm Vickers. But this was also the reason that they actually switched to using helium in their balloons, because it wasn't flammable, because they realized they were too easy to take down if they were full of hydrogen, so they switched to helium. The pairing of the Vickers machine gun and the 11x50mm Gras incendiary rounds was officially adopted by the Allies and used as their standard anti-balloon weapon pretty much throughout the whole war, even being used in planes for the same reason. Another weird way that the 11x59mm was used was as a grenade launcher, otherwise known as the Bombardist DR or Bombardist Doctor. Sorry, forgot to look into that one. Don't know what that is. There'll be a little explanation right there. But what they would do is they would cut down the barrels and the stocks, and they would kind of rig them up to this apparatus thing. You'll see it right here. And they would use blanks to launch grenades over at their enemies, essentially serving as a trench mortar apparatus. And then later in 1916, they actually armed the army of Serbia with about 20,000 Gras rifles, chambered in 11x59mm, as well as sending about 450,000 Gras rifles and ammunition to Russia during their Mosin-Nagant shortage of 1915. Oftentimes when you got Gras rifles directly from the French, they would come with little notes that said, "dropped once, never fired," so you know you were getting something that was in mint condition. They were even being used during World War II by the Greeks during their resistance to the Axis, as well as against the Ottoman Empire. Okay, now that we've gone over the very brief section of conflicts this round saw, let's go ahead and jump into the weapons that it was used in. So since we've pretty much already went over the Gras rifles, I figured we'd go ahead and jump into the Remington rolling blocks. That's right, among the many different calibers, I mean many different calibers that these rifles were chambered in, a good handful of them were chambered in today's cartridge. And while I couldn't quite find a number of how many were chambered in it, because I couldn't find it, they were being used by the likes of Ethiopia, Chile, and even Japan. As we all know, the Remington rolling block was a single-shot, breech-loading rifle designed in 1867. It truly seemed to stand the test of time, as we've been able to tell, both due to its ruggedness, durability, and simplicity to manufacture, seeing use in its other calibers in dozens of battles, wars, and conflicts. And that's about it on the Remington rolling block. Moving on. And then we have the Milonis rifle, or more officially, the Greek Milonis M1872. This was a falling block action rifle designed by Greek artillery major Efstathios Milonis. Damn, I got that right the first time. That was cool. Although this rifle was both designed and adopted by the Greek army, they had no way of actually manufacturing it. So really the only one that was actually Greece made or Greek made was the prototype. Therefore, they had to outsource it to Belgium to have all of their rifles manufactured. Unfortunately, due to the fact that this rifle was pretty short-lived, there was only about 8,500 ever made, making them pretty rare. I also read somewhere that apparently the Melonis rifle was chambered in 11x59 before the Gras, but I'm not too sure on that. I don't know how much truth that holds, so just kind of take it with a grain of salt. Now, I know we've already talked about the Vickers a little bit during the conflict section, but I want to talk about it some more because it is a very impressive piece of machinery, at least from what I've read about it. The Vickers was a water-cooled heavy/medium-duty machine gun that had a reputation for being pretty much unbreakable. What you would do is, so you see that big thing on the barrel, you would fill that up with water, and it would keep the barrel cool during long, extended amounts of sustained fire. In fact, in one instance, on August 16th of 1916, the British 100th Battalion took 10 Vickers machine guns and sustained fire for 12 hours, going through about 100 barrels and like 1,000,000 rounds of ammo. Meaning the only thing that went out on them was the barrels. Not a single gun jammed. They maintained sustained fire for 12 hours, which is insane. So this thing's pretty awesome. Truly displaying its superior engineering and durability. See, originally the Vickers machine gun was chambered in .303 British, but like we talked about before, they realized that those smaller regular rounds weren't doing the job that they needed to on the observation balloons. So they rechambered them in 11mm with those lovely incendiary rounds and created the ultimate tool for getting the job done. Although the Vickers was eventually replaced, it saw use in various different conflicts all the way until like 1968. Now it's time to talk dimensions of ballistics. Starting from the top, we have a bullet diameter of 0.44 inches, a neck diameter of 0.47 inches, a base diameter of 0.54 inches, a case length of 2.3 inches, and an overall length of 3 inches. Onto the ballistics of this white flag cartridge. These babies were pushing a 380 grain bullet using 81 grains of F1 black powder, I think, getting about 1,500 feet per second and around 1,900 foot-pounds of energy. So definitely a heavy hitter and nothing that you would want to be on the business end of. And if you're ever interested in loading your own 11mm Vickers, you can actually if you don't have any brass, you can take some old or 348 Winchester cases, resize them, throw in a large rifle primer, a .446 inch bullet, 81 grains of F1 black powder, and boom, you've got yourself a 11mm baguette. But beware, I hear whenever you go to shoot these rounds that gravity seems to have an opposing effect on your arms, as if the universe is begging you to put them in the air. Okay, on to movies. Now, I haven't heard of most of these movies, if I'm being completely honest with you. Most of these are just stand-ins, like the ones where they use 11mm Gras, which is what I'm mostly shooting for here. Later I'll do one on the 11mm Vickers, but we'll get there. It's been in a lot of stuff, but I mostly wanted to stick to the original rifle. But believe it or not, most of these features, it's just a stand-in for a chassepot rifle. They're just using an 11mm Gras instead of a chassepot. So that's pretty much it. But let's start with the only title I recognize, and that is Around the World in 80 Days. And no, I'm not talking about the far superior 2004 version starring Stephen Coogan and Jackie Chan. We're talking about the 2021 TV series starring David Tennant, Leone Benici, and Ibrahim Koma. These people's names, I swear. This version does take a less comedic approach and more of a dramatic one, and I'm sure a lot of you like that, but I'm a little bit biased because I grew up watching the Jackie Chan one, so sue me. Don't do that. And no, I haven't seen this one. I don't really plan to. I'm not really interested in it. But if you have, let me know how it is. Comment down below. Let me know how good it is. Now, the overall story, or the base story, is pretty much the same as the original version, at least as far as from what I've read. The main characters are bet that they can't get around the world in 80 days using any means necessary. And guess what? They barely make it right at the end. What a surprise. But the reason I'm mentioning this show is because in one scene, Loic Dejani's, good lord, these people's names, his character, otherwise known as Gerard, just went with Gerard, uses an 1874 Gras in place of a 1866 chassepot, as this event takes place in 1872, so the Gras isn't even out yet. But but he uses it to attempt to assassinate the current French president. Unfortunately for Gerard, David Tennant's character, Phineas Fogg, accidentally stops the assassination when the bullet hits him instead of the target. His flask catching the bullet before it can do any actual real damage. Well, his flask wasn't okay, but no one sentient got hurt. We have another recent flick from 2017 called The Lost City of Z, starring Charlie Hunnam as Percy Fawcett, Tom Holland as Jack Fawcett, as well as Robert Pattinson as Henry Costin. In the movie, Percy is told of a lost civilization in the Amazonian rainforest. Though he declines to believe the claims at first, he eventually stumbles upon some proof that the civilization exists and becomes interested in finding it. So he gets some folks to join him. They go looking for it. It doesn't go very well. They come back. Percy fights in World War I. Then Percy and his son go back to the rainforest, try to find it again. Years later, his wife is being told that she needs to give up hope and that they're dead. But then she gets a compass sent to her that Percy told her he would send her if he ever found the civilization, thus renewing her hope that her son and husband are alive, and she goes out looking for them. That's pretty much the plot in a nutshell. But the whole reason that I have this movie in here is because there's one scene where Percy uses a 74 Gras to kill a pig. That's it. So that's about it. There's no movies called the 1874 Gras, so we can't do that. Or 11x59mm Gras. There's no movies called that. We finally broke the cycle. That had been happening constantly. Last but not least, we arrived to the Vickers machine gun, which, like I mentioned, was chambered at 11mm. But this was actually in a lot more stuff than I thought it was, especially a lot longer ago. It's been in media as far back as 1918 in a movie called Heart of the World, as well as recently as 2024 in The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, Season 2, and plenty of stuff in between. It's also been featured in a handful of video games like Sniper Elite 3 and Battlefield 1, which, if you didn't know, was set in World War I. Unfortunately, most of these are chambered in like 303 British, and I don't think you can use many of them. I don't know. I haven't played the game. If you have, let me know. I don't know if you ever actually get to shoot the Vickers, but again, it's not chambered in incendiary rounds, so whatever. Well, there you have it, folks, the 11x59mm Gras. If there's anything that I missed that you would have liked to see, please don't be afraid to comment down below. If there's some sections that y'all want me to start adding, like certain topics you want me to touch on for every round, let me know. I'm always open to criticisms or ideas. I need them, obviously. I mean, it took me 2 weeks to do this video. Also, I have no idea what next week's video is going to be about. Like I said, we're getting into some rounds where there's really not that much to talk about. Like this one, obviously I somehow made it work, but some of these, there's just not much to talk about. I'm not putting out a 3-minute video on the very little that I could find. Again, I'm very surprised that I found enough to even make this video this long. I don't know how long this is going to be, but it's not going to be very long. At least I wouldn't think so. So I haven't decided what next week's video is going to be about. I might do a group of rounds. I might try to do something different, change it up a little bit, give me a break from doing the history ones. I don't know. I haven't decided. I've been wanting to try some new stuff out on the channel, so give me some ideas. If there's something y'all want to see on here, let me know. Something other than a cartridge history. I know that's what the channel's about, but I want to do some stuff that's a little different. I'd like to try out some new stuff and see what kind of works. So just let me know. Who knows, maybe I'm just letting the stress get to me of my own self-induced schedule that I put on myself. But anyways, as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to stay up to date on all of our cartridge adventures and everything in between. So until next time, keep your brass polished, your powder dry, and always stay chambered in history. Thank you.